Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, whenever you are. Hello. Thank you for watching my videos. It's Mike. It's July 6th, 2009. A few stories over the weekend that really caught my eye that I thought I would highlight. Now, I've got a lot of stuff linked over here. Mostly it's grouped into sort of the same sort of topics. The initial one, unemployment. Now, on Thursday, the United States released their unemployment figures. They were dire, but and much worse than the economists were actually expecting. The official figures is that the US economy lost 467,000 jobs in May, which will most likely be revised upwards. Regardless, the big number that sticks out, of course, as mentioned in Ambrose Evans Pritchard's piece on the ticking time bomb that is unemployment. Time worked has fallen 6.9%. So that the average work week is now 33 hours a week for most people. At no time in the 1990 or 2001 recessions did we ever come close to seeing such a detonating jobs figure. Now, what does this mean? Well, to begin with, people are making a lot less money, which also means there's a lot less taxes being generated. But there's all kinds of other things that are going on. He's saying here, of course, 238,000 state workers in California have been working 2 days less a month without pay since February. Variants of this are occurring in 22 states of the United States. Center for Labor Market Studies in Boston says U.S. unemployment is now 18.2%, counting the old way. Shadow Stats is saying that somewhere roughly in the order of 20.4%, thereabouts, and they expect it to get worse. Now, there's a knock-on effect to all of this. I mean, essentially people make less money, and what they're doing is they're not spending it, they're saving it. Now, of course, US GDP, 70% of it is based on consumer spending. The big number, it says, is that the savings rate has increased to 6.9%. Well, they're not saving the money, folks, they're paying their debt off. So there isn't actually 6.9% of GDP in savings, it's going into whatever, paying off credit cards, paying off mortgages and loans and so forth. So 6.9% of 70, you can do the math. I mean, basically 7 of 7 is 4, so it's 4%, a 4.9% decline in GDP. Anyway, moving on. Some 342,000 homes were foreclosed in April. 1 month, 342,000 homes foreclosed in the States. Now what's happening though, and Ambrose mentions this here, sheriffs in Michigan and Illinois are quietly refusing to toss families out on the street. So they may have been foreclosed on, but they're not leaving their houses. And the local sheriff and police and so forth aren't being aggressive in removing people from their homes if they have nowhere else to go. Europe is a year or so behind, so saith Ambrose, but is catching up fast. Unemployment in Spain reached 18.7%. Now this is the official figure. Unofficially, I suspect it's the same as what their dodgy stuff they're doing in the States, not counting people after a certain length of time of unemployment. It's very interesting stuff going on. French President Nicolas Sarkozy, with a good nose for popular moods, says, "We must overhaul everything. We cannot have a system of rentiers and social dumping under globalization." This is true, Mr. Sarkozy. The message has not reached Wall Street or the city yet. If bankers know what's good for them, they'll take a teacher's salary. I've also linked an article where apparently the bankers are finding rather dodgy ways of giving themselves bonuses to avoid the 50% tax. Doing things like giving themselves contracts for options for future redemption, stuff like that. And Her Majesty's Revenue Collection is not particularly pleased. However, moving on to the next set of stories. Water in California. Now, one thing most people aren't aware of is California provides 1/6 of the food production of the United States. California is the bread basket, or the fruit basket, more likely, of the U.S. Fruit and veg basket. There was a group of environmentalists interested in saving a 2-inch long minnow. And what they did is they went to a federal court and they got some judge to grant them the ability to shut off the water to a particular part of California. Well, 6 months on, that particular part of California is turning into a dust bowl. Yes, the new Dust Bowl of 2009. How nice. I seem to recall we had one of those in the Great Depression as well. We'll probably see more of this sort of thing as well when they actually start foreclosing on farms and so forth across the states. But regardless, linked a number of articles, a couple of articles on how this is going. Governor, water will be released to farms. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, governor of California, has determined that this is actually a really bad thing, and screw the federal judge that granted them this injunction to prevent the water flowing. He's going to provide some water. May not be enough, it may be too late. Sorry, Arnie. I do hope you don't come back. Now, so there's a number of articles here. Senate committee votes to expand the Clean Water Act. Now this is scary as heck. Along the same lines of water and food production and so forth. New federal laws are being proposed that will make all water in the United States federally regulated. At the moment, only certain waterways are federally regulated, but this new modifications to the Clean Water Act could effectively mean that water in your pond has to be federally regulated. Water in a culvert that's sitting at the side of your property is federally regulated. It's going insane, folks. Anyway, and a little article here that was very interesting. New York City's first rooftop hydroponic farm. Yes, expect this to come to a city near you. Hydroponic farming in the roofs of the city. You don't need any soil for that, apparently. You just do it with fertilizers and good chemicals. Yummy stuff. Right. I linked a couple of videos on Water Wars, the new Dust Bowl. And San Joaquin Valley. I can't pronounce that, I'm sorry, my Spanish is horrible. Anyway, next set of articles. Quantitative easing, credit easing, and enhanced credit support aren't working. What's next? A couple of articles. One of them from Naked Capitalism. Okay, so this could be written off, oh, it's just a bunch of lunatics out on the internet. What do they know about money and finance and economics and whatnot? Apparently more than most people in government, but regardless. Article from the Telegraph also linked here. QE just acting as a sugar rush for insolvent banks that deserve to fail. Now, essentially, this is from an economist. This is a real economist, people. He's basically saying it didn't work. Pumping this money into the system didn't work. And he points out in the middle of the article that the Bank of England, which was supposed to be buying corporate bonds with this current round of quantitative easing, i.e. printing money, folks, they're supposed to buy corporate bonds with that money. Well, 1% of it has been spent on corporate bonds. There's not a big enough corporate bond market to absorb all the money they were throwing at it or creating. So what have they been buying instead? Treasury gilts. Yep, buying their own debt. Quantitative easing, folks, is merely a way of printing money. Now, of course, they aren't actually printing any physical cash out of this. It's just little decimal points in the system. Little blips in a digital world. Of course, the Bank of England rejects criticism of quantitative easing. Of course they would. I think it's a good idea. Now, one of the things in the 20s that really indicated what was going on, there was a huge exuberance throughout various cities in the world, and a serious reduction in the morals of the world. Prohibition was going strong, but people were still going out and finding ways of drinking. One of the things that happened was you had this thing called the flapper. A flapper is a term. In the States, it was because they thought it was, the dress that was flapping around. Yeah, well, the word actually comes from Britain, and is kind of related to prostitution. But anyway, never mind. So basically it was women going out and smoking and drinking and doing all sorts of bad things, and of course what was reported in the press at the time went nowhere near to how depraved the behavior was. Well, The Independent had a very interesting article. Sex and the Modern Girl. Are we witnessing a new age of female sexual assertiveness? Apparently there's these little things called kitten parties or whatever. And basically it's a bunch of oversexed women getting together and having orgies. And basically bringing along assorted men to have a little fun on the weekends because of their highly stressed work. Boy, they're going to have fun when all the money's gone, isn't it? Finally, trade credit insurance. A couple of articles on trade credit insurance and what impact this could have on the wider economy. Now, most people think, well, who cares? Credit insurance, that's really boring. Companies need this to finance the purchase of supplies. Essentially, what this is, trade credit insurance, is if a company says, okay, I need to get, I need to get 3,000 reams of paper in, let's say, and I'm going to go ask a particular supplier to provide it to me. I'm going to give him 30 days to provide this to me. And he's going to go and find some trees somewhere and find some company to chop down the trees and all that stuff and make the paper and provide the paper to me. Well, in the meantime, perhaps that company that's supplying the paper goes bust. For whatever reason, bad management, just economic crisis, whatever, I'm out of money. Because basically, you know, I may have provided some money up front to the guy to actually start deliveries and so forth, or I may be expecting that cash flow, etc., etc. So one thing you could do as a company is go and get trade credit insurance, which basically said if the supplier went bust, you would still get something for your money. And get money back on the insurance. Well, the trade credit insurance market has seized up. Nobody's given anybody trade credit insurance, and it's having a really weird knock-on effect across all kinds of different sectors of the economy. So I've linked in a couple of articles. Trade credit insurance claims hit record levels. Okay, well that means, yeah, a lot of companies are going bust, and the insurance companies are having to pay out on this trade credit insurance, which means it's more difficult to get. They're going to make it even more difficult for people to get it. So trade credit claims doubled to £316 million. Threshers suffers hangover from diminution of credit insurance. Now threshers, you would figure, you know, would be dealing with reputable suppliers of wine and spirits, etc. And they're having difficulty getting trade credit insurance. Vasanta Group in talks to save 1,400 jobs as it teeters off brink of collapse. Now what is the cause of the brink of collapse? They cannot get trade credit insurance. So, finally, a couple of little articles, and one huge one. First one, lack of properties prop up house valuations. Now, there's an article here in the Times that basically saying that the lack of properties available is preventing the prices from dropping in the British home market. Effectively, people are trying to hang on desperately to keep their house, and they're not going to sell it because they know that they're not going to get as much as they would have done a couple of years ago. So they're holding on to these things, which in turn is forcing the market to maintain unrealistic prices. When people start having to default on mortgages and having to sell their houses, then we're going to see an interesting decline. Last one, Sweden. Sweden cuts deposit rate to negative 0.25%. Now, there's been a lot of comments back and forth saying, no, Sweden's just, they've cut their rates to 0.25%, not negative 0.25%. Okay, I've linked to the article from the Central Bank of Sweden, the Riksbank. Basically, it was a press release saying, yes, the repo rate cut to 0.25%. So basically, their main lending rate is now 0.25%. They have a secondary rate that's running at 0.75%. Buried, second to last paragraph of this press release. They're modifying their deposit rate to 0.25%. Minus 0.25%. My mistake. Now, it's the central bank. So the only people that would be depositing money there are other banks in Sweden. This is not, you know, for commercial, or perhaps for some commercial enterprises, they may also be trying to save their money in central bank. But primarily it's all the other banks within Sweden. Now, what this is going to do is force these banks to find somewhere else to stick their money. So I'm kind of guessing that the Swedish central bank, in doing this, is hoping that it's going to kickstart a bit more lending. Perhaps even just some overnight lending between the banks. So that, you know, one bank will stick some money in another bank and then they can use it to finance something overnight. Perhaps in trading in the States, etc. It's a very, very, very interesting term, though. A negative 0.25% interest rate being paid on deposits to the Swedish central bank. I wonder if the Fed's going to start doing this over in the States. Maybe the Bank of England's looking at this going, ooh, there's a good idea. Idiots. Peace, love, understanding, think about things. I'll speak to you again soon.